I can confirm that you are now live.
All right, thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. And as always, we begin with a land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So I'll begin just with a roll call, ask people just to acknowledge that they are present, and we'll just check your audio and video for that. David Foster.
Hello, here.
Okay. Yuji Ching.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Sio Godet.
Here.
Lindsay Bedard.
Hi there, I'm here.
Do we have Andrew Medeiros?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Good. And Robert Jarvis. Is Robert Jarvis present?
Here I am.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we'll start with our item number 2, approval of minutes. We have minutes that were from November 18th of last year that had undergone a few revisions. And so we'll just ask if there's anything further on the November 18th minutes. Are they complete, or any errors or omissions still there? No, hearing nothing. Okay, so we require a mover and seconder to approve the November 18th minutes. David moves it. Do we have a seconder?
I can second.
Theo, okay. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? No, okay. So then going on to the draft minutes of April 14th, our last meeting. Any errors or omissions noted on that? Hearing none, I'll call for someone to move acceptance of the April 14th minutes. Sio? Seconded by David, okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so those are accepted. So I'll ask the clerk if we have any additions or deletions to the agenda as it's been circulated.
There are no additions or deletions.
Okay. Ask a mover and seconder for the order of business on the agenda. Andrew and Sio. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we have the minutes, or sorry, the order of business approved. Business arising out of the minutes. I'm not aware that we have anything there. Jill, is there anything coming out of those minutes? I don't believe so.
No, there's nothing from the municipal clerk's office.
Okay. I'll ask if anyone has a conflict of interest in regard to any of the items on our agenda tonight. Any of the members? No. Okay. Consideration of deferred business. We have no business deferred from previous meetings. Ask clerk's office, do we have any correspondence or petitions that have been submitted? There was one piece of correspondence that was circulated by the clerk's office earlier today in regard to the Eisner Cove wetland situation. It was just someone's comments and concerns in regard to that. But I'll ask if there's anything further.
There is nothing further from the clerk's office. The one piece, as you stated, was circulated.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our item number 7.3, presentations. We've had a request from Mr. Shalom Mandeville to provide a presentation to us tonight in regard to the discharge of treated or untreated, I guess mostly treated sewage from facilities into local lakes and some of the issues around that. So we have Shalom Mandeville. and also Dr. Joseph Karakis, who is present. I should, for the members, just make a note that Dr. Karakis and I go back quite a ways. I first met Dr. Karakis in 1980 when I started at Dalhousie. Joseph was with the Canadian Wildlife Service and maintained an office and laboratory there. So he actually supported some of the field work and research that I did for my PhD thesis. So it's been about 35 years, I think, Jose, just since we've seen each other. So I'll ask Mr. Mandeville, I think, is going to provide the presentation. Shalom, if you want to go ahead, we have, I think, 10 minutes allotted for the presentation.
Okay, first of all, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. For me, it's a little bit distorted.
You may want to just try turning off your video. It may make it a bit clearer. Sometimes we find that that helps a lot. So, and I will put your presentation up right now.
I don't know, the sound is really, all of your sounds is all break up.
I don't think I can hear Shalom very well.
If you go down, Shalom, on the bottom left-hand corner, there's an audio button. If you hit the arrow, and if you maybe want to try going through, like sometimes headphones that make it a bit more challenging. So if you wanted to try going through your computer audio and maybe not use your headphones, it may clear it up some.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Not very well.
Hello, can you hear me now?
No, I think that's actually worse, I'm afraid.
You can hear me?
It's still really choppy. Perhaps, like I said, did you want to try maybe turning off your video and see if that helps? Like turn off your video feed?
I'm sorry.
Like if you turn off your video feed, so down again in the left-hand corner of your screen, like if you just turn your video off.
I don't know what's going on. You still hear me, right? I am on my Logitech USB. It's supposed to be working.
I'm sorry, Shalom, it's very choppy. Keep dropping out. We can't really make out what you're saying.
Even your sound, even your sound is breaking up very much. I don't know how to improve this.
Jillian, would you mind?
You can see my picture, right?
Jillian, could you maybe type into the chat for Shalom to see if he's also having audio issues? That might.
I guess we have some. Do you want me to call it perhaps on the telephone?
You could try to call in, that might work.
Okay, I'll call and see what happens. I have to go to my phone there.
I have stopped your video feed. Did you want to try now? And see if it's any better?
Jill, I think he has his headphones off now, so I'm not sure he'll be able to hear you. He is going to try to call in on his phone for better audio.
Hello? 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're a little bit faint. Can you turn up your volume a bit, perhaps?
I'm on my desk phone because this other thing wasn't working. So I don't
Okay.
know how to put the volume here.
It's faint because the audio you're hearing right now is still through his computer. He hasn't been unmuted on the phone.
I should mute here.
No.
If you try Shalom, press *66 and see if that will do it.
You just became
Should I-
unmuted, Chalom. Give it a try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's better.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what happened. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to really summarize because there's a lot of time was spent there. Basically, what it is, I requested that the advisory board set up some sort of a MO, modus operandi, to set up standards to analyze direct discharge of package plants into lakes. I don't want to go through too much history then because it will take too much time, but there was a plant approved at Lake Thomas from a senior citizens complex, and it allegedly, I'd underline the word allegedly, it was a direct discharge and there was no sand filtration, nothing. So that people understand, I've studied engineering as well as limnology in my undergraduate as well as graduate, so I have some knowledge so that people there who don't know me. You know me, Dr. Blowen, and so also Professor knows me as well. He and I spent quite a bit of time discussing on other things, Professor Medeiros. So I'm hoping your advisory board can, I know this is provincial legislation. I know that I've been activist since late 70s, but I thought the advisory board could take some policy matter leadership. That's all. And there was a very nice study published in the Nova Scotia Institute of Science by Dr. I was about to say Blumen, Dr. Karakas, who was a senior scientist at Environment Canada. He was also a senior scientist with the 20-year research of the OECD, which had 80 federal government scientists, all postdoctorate, so to set standards on trophic analysis and other things. And he will be here to answer that question because he did a study on a lake in Cape Breton Highlands Park. And I believe Jill McGillicuddy sent you all that paper from '83, where he
Yes.
recommended against it, and I believe the provincial environment listened to that. So Dr. Karakas will be a better person to answer, and I also see Dr. Blowen, you said that you knew him since 1980, so it makes it very informal. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is there any further presentation, Shalom, or that was it?
No, I just wanted to make it short and stuff. Maybe 1 second. Maybe if Miss, I can't pronounce her name too well. I apologize. Miss McGilcuddy can show the PowerPoint I sent her. Just four slides only.
Okay, Jill, could we get that up?
It was her idea for me to send a PowerPoint, for which I thank her very much.
Yes.
Okay, this is just the intro, and I just put a little bit of intro on the OECD research, which involved 18 member Western countries at 50 research institutes, involving 80 of the Western world's leading limnologists of the time, culminating with the final 1982 report by Vollenweider and Caracas. Vollenweider is deceased now, and I consulted him over the years as well. And incidentally, both of them were with Environment Canada. The next slide, please. Now, this is about orthophosphate versus total phosphorus, because most of the effluent in a package plant is highly biologically available, so there's a way to ascertain that. And the next slide, please. And this is the way to use it, and this is what Dr. Caracas used in the Cape Breton paper. And the last slide. And I just put the front page only, as you know. I didn't want to make the PowerPoint too lengthy. You know, I've been to meetings so that during the last COVID years where it can get boring. So I just put this in where Dr. Caracas found out that by taking the what do you call the equivalent of orthophosphate from the package plant, he found that the lake would go from oligotrophic to mesotrophic. And this was in a lake in Cape Breton Highlands Park. And as some of you know, the Parks Canada has a lot of power. They can actually stop development outside the boundary. Now, with this, I'm going to stop. And if you have, I wish you'll have questions for Dr. Caracas. We'll put him to work.
Okay, thank you, Shalom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and that the paper by Dr. Karakis was circulated to the members here, so we all have a copy of that. Does anyone have a question for Dr. Karakis? No? Perhaps, Joe, I'll just ask, based on your work, you know, the sewage treatment plants are a provincial responsibility, so the municipality has limited jurisdiction over where and how they can discharge and how the sewage is to be treated. Do you have any advice for us as representatives of the municipality as to what level of treatment should be required in a small sewage treatment plant if it's going to discharge to a lake?
Are you asking me, Dr. Blumen?
No, I guess particularly for Dr. Karakis.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know the technicalities of how to do that, but I'd like to mention that the Kings County is using that OECD report, or use the OECD report to establish standards for their lake system. So it would be perhaps useful to contact them what they did or how far they could go in that regard.
Okay.
You see, the King County had that report study, I would say, in the last 20 years or 18 years. And they are making the final report recently.
Okay. Well, perhaps through HRM we can ask to see what their procedures and policies are.
Because you know, there is a county and they did that work, and the province had a representation in that committee, and I was involved as well in their efforts.
Yes. Okay, and maybe just I'll mention, just for the benefit of anybody who may not be aware, the federal government does now have a set of regulations through Environment Canada for sewage discharges and levels of treatment that must be achieved depending on the nature of the receiving water. So those regulations would apply, I believe, to any new treatment plants that are being built now, and dependent on the level of risk involved in the receiving waters would determine what level of treatment is required. So those federal regulations, I think, they're fairly new, a few years old now, but I think they may help as well. So I'll ask once more, does anyone have a question? Sia.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so are there sewage treatment plants that are sort of outputting, shall we say, to other than seawater in HRM? Is this an issue here, or are they mostly outputting to seawater?
Well, I can actually answer that based on my experience when I was with Halifax Water. Halifax Water operates, if I recall right, I think it's about 15 or 16 sewage treatment plants. The largest ones do discharge to Halifax Harbor, to salt water. So there's one in Bedford, one in Halifax, one in Dartmouth, one in Eastern Passage, and one in Herring Cove. So those are the largest plants that we have here, and they do discharge to seawater. However, the remainder of them, about 10 others, varying sizes, but basically smaller plants, do discharge to fresh waters. Halifax Water kind of inherited all of those from prior operators, but those are the municipally operated ones. There are a number of them that do discharge to lakes and rivers. And in addition to that, there would be a number of private sewage treatment plants, like the one that Shalom mentioned that may happen at Lake Thomas. I do know, for example, at Lake Thomas, there's already a small sewage treatment plant there for the Inn on the Lake, the hotel, which I believe discharges to Lower Lake Thomas. And that's just one example, but there would be a number of others. Mm-hmm. And I'm not aware of all of them, of course, because they're privately owned and operated, and they would be responsible to Nova Scotia Environment for their permits and conditions of operation.
Okay. And also, you mentioned the federal government is setting standards now, but are they expecting the province to enforce the standards? Is that the idea?
No, those would be, the regulations were done through the Fisheries Act federally. Oh. And enforcement would be done by Environment Canada. Okay. Because that's under federal jurisdiction, but it really just relates to impacts on fish, because that's the federal doorway into lake impacts would be through fish and fish habitat. Mm-hmm. So that was the rationale for those regulations, I remember at the time. And so they would be enforced by Environment Canada, but the permits that actually allow each individual plant to operate are granted by the province. And so the province can set whatever conditions it deems necessary, and the level of treatment and the quality of the effluent that has to be achieved for the plant. Mm-hmm. So it's,
Chairman, can I add, sorry.
Yes, sir, sorry, go ahead.
Can I add something for that gentleman? See, I'm an old timer. I've been involved in almost all the lakes, about 1,000 lakes, okay? And there has been a lot of concern at Springfield Lake. This is the big Springfield Lake in Upper Sackville, and there is a treatment plant there, which it doesn't discharge into the lake, but it goes into a stream, which goes into another lake, which is called Fennerty Lake. Incidentally, Fennerty is named after the man who discovered how to make paper from pulp. I like to throw out these things. And people are concerned, because I was involved in a lot of meetings. And John Shepard at one time, who was the Tony Blumen's boss for a while, he said they're going to divert that, like into the main Halifax system. but they have not done that yet. And it's just that as an activist, a lot of people know me and they approach me in case somebody is wondering why I get involved.
Okay, thank you.
If I can ask a question as well, just for point of information, because I work in the industry now, medical industry. I wonder, since we mentioned private treatment system, I wonder how does the industrial sewage treatment gets released? Does it also go into the ocean? So, things like hospitals or pharmaceutical factories. And so that's kind of part of my question. And also another aspect of private treatment is septic system in residential houses, because we have a lot of those here in Nova Scotia. I wonder how does those sewage get discharged? Because I don't know, just for my knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, well, again, I can speak to that if you want. So any large industrial operation or things like a hospital, any major facilities, if they're within the serviced boundary of Halifax and Dartmouth.
I cannot hear Tony for some reason. Is that just me?
Tony somehow disappeared.
Yeah, I lost him as well.
Yeah, his picture froze.
I'm reaching out to Tony to see if he can maybe try rejoining the meeting. I'm not sure what has happened, if he's lost connection. So if you just want to.
He's off the meeting now, so I assume he probably knows.
He has just rejoined and I've promoted him, so we should be good.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Welcome back.
Thanks. Sorry, I have no idea what happened there, but I left the meeting and rejoined, and usually that seems to help. Sorry, so, okay, I was speaking about major facilities. If they're within the service boundary, in other words, the area where the sewers run to, then they would be connected to the sewer, and that would transfer their waste into the system, and it would ultimately go to one of HRM's or Halifax Water's sewage treatment plants. So it would obtain treatment in that way. Smaller private facilities, if they're outside of the service boundary, then they would, if they're big enough, they would need to have their own individual treatment plant, a package plant, as Shalom mentioned the term. And then Eugene also mentioned septic systems. Of course, an individual house, if it's not within the service boundary, it wouldn't be connected to a sewer, so it would have its own septic system, which is a rudimentary sort of treatment. And then the septic system discharges typically through a series of pipes basically into the ground. And so the sewage, when it's been in the septic tank for a little while, gets some level of treatment, and then it's discharged to the ground and ultimately would become part of the groundwater, which normally doesn't really present a problem. But if there are a number of houses around a lake that have their own septic systems and the sewage is ultimately getting into the groundwater, it can enter the lake and can contribute to bacteria or phosphorus as a nutrient to the lake and have definitely some impacts. I know I think it was first looked into in Ontario when they started doing phosphorus modeling of lakes there, and they related the degree of development around a lake and the individual number of septic systems to the impacts on the lake. And it does tend to eutrify a lake, promote plant growth, take up oxygen. So septic systems can have an effect, certainly in my experience from the little I know about it. Again, those are all regulated by the province. The municipality doesn't really have a role in managing or regulating septic systems. They're individually approved by the province.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else on this topic? I guess, so we appreciate Mr. Mandeville's suggestion. We can take this under advisement and look into it further. We can certainly see if the board and the members wish to make any recommendations to HRM in this regard. And we've acknowledged we do have a limited jurisdiction here because a new sewage treatment plant, if it's going in, would be approved and regulated by the province, not the municipality. But perhaps through some development regulations, if HRM has any scope to influence where such a facility might be located, where a development or an institution that's going to require its own septic system or its own sewage treatment plant is going to be located, it would probably have to go through at least a level of approval through the municipal planning process. So there may be some scope for influence there. I don't know. We're going to have to look into that. Okay, if there's nothing else, well, I thank Mr. Mandeville for his presentation, and thank you, Joe Karakis, for being available here to help us understand things. And on a personal level, I'll say, Joe, it's very good to see you again. Been quite a while.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something quick?
Yes, certainly.
I just want to remind people that we do have a provincial phosphorus model, and Dr. Blumen, you actually sat on the committee. I was invited too, but I was doing way too much volunteer work. So that also has how a municipality can control development before, without getting lakes eutrophic. And lastly, I'm pretty upset with myself. I'm the one who got Karakis involved in the Zoom. He was never involved in Zoom. So he has done a better job on Zoom than I did. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. All right. So thank you very much for that presentation and discussion.
Thank you for everybody.
Quite welcome. Yep. So we're going to move on to our next item, which is a presentation from the HRM beach monitoring staff on their protocols for 2022. So this is for beaches that have municipal supervision, in other words, lifeguarding at the beach. And so we have a presentation on what their monitoring protocols are for those locations.
Hi, how's my audio?
Audio is good.
Audio is good. Okay, great. So I am Elizabeth Montgomery. I just started as a water resource specialist with HRM at the beginning of April, for those of you who don't know me. And I've just put together, I'm going to try it with my video. I'm not sure about the internet here at the office. How's that? Okay, fine. Yeah, so I'm just going to put together a short presentation just of our beach protocols. I think they're like, unless you guys have like small feedback that we can incorporate for this year, I think they're pretty set, but we're finding them a little bit, we need to walk the fine line basically between keeping the beaches open as much as possible while also like preserving public health and safety. And we love your feedback on any suggestions to maybe walk that line a little bit better right now, especially with our blue-green algae protocol, which I'll talk about in a second. We really jump right away to just closing it down, and there can be quite extended closures. So we're just trying to avoid that, but also do it safely. So I'm just going to run through a quick PowerPoint, and then we can talk if you have thoughts, or if you have feedback later, we can reach out, whatever works for you folks. So just give me one moment. All right, so this is just an overview to the beach protocol. Presenting to you folks now. Like I said, I'm Elizabeth. Excuse me. Okay. So just an overview of the protocol. Like I said, it's in place to ensure that beaches can be kept open as long as possible during the summer, while ensuring that the public stays safe from chemical, physical, and biological hazards that might be in the water. So the main parameters that we measure under this protocol are fecal bacteria in the form of E. coli at our freshwater beaches and enterococci at our saltwater beach, which this year there's just one that's going to be supervised. And we also monitor, so those undergo like routine scheduled monitoring, and we also monitor for cyanobacteria. This response is a lot more reactive, so we don't engage our cyanobacteria protocol unless there's been a report either from the public or from the beaches staff. And so the beaches staff, the lifeguards, they are trained and do ongoing visual monitoring, and they also are usually our first line for detecting any other potential hazards, like an oil spill or something like that. But we don't get that very often. So we do monitoring at supervised beaches just in the period when they are actually supervised. So that's between July 1st and August 31st every year. Sometimes at some sites it's extended through Labor Day, but typically that is the season. We compare the water quality results that we get to the Canadian recreational water quality guidelines. And exceedances of guideline values at these sites will lead to a beach closure. I'll go over that procedure a little bit later. So the beaches staff, who are technically under parks, they report to me and the aquatic specialist, who's a supervisor. Their supervisor, excuse me, and so they're responsible for the ongoing monitoring. The supervisors are the ones who take the samples for us, and they've already been trained for the beach protocol this year for 2022. We also have some partners that we send our samples to. So BV Labs is a certified lab in Bedford. They do our bacteria analysis. They accept our samples when we send them in for microsystem analysis. They have to send those to Ontario. They aren't equipped to do the analysis themselves, but they handle the samples for us. And we also contract with BioLimno Research and Consulting, who do microscopy. And so they do species level analysis to identify whether or not there is toxin producing bacteria in a particular sample when we send it in. And that would be related to blue-green algae. So I'll go through our fecal bacteria protocol first. So this is, like I said, it's a routine monitoring program. There's no special triggers for this. It just happens every week throughout the beach season. So supervisors take the samples weekly. We ask them to do it early in the week. So typically they'd be submitted by end of day Tuesday or end of day Wednesday if there is a holiday on Monday to the labs. And so at each of the 18 locations that we'll be monitoring this year that are supervised, they'll take five samples across the beach, kind of equidistant from each other through the supervised area. And they're taken from a depth where people are hanging out. So they try and get in typically above their knees to take a sample. And then they're submitted to the lab. We get the results back and take a geometric mean calculation and then compare that to the beach closure levels, which I have on this slide here. So for E. coli, it's 200 CFU, which is colony forming units per 100 milliliters of sample. And that's, like I said, the geomean, not an individual sample. And then enterococci, it's the same thing. It's a geomean of all 5 samples per location, and it's 35 CFU per 100 milliliters. So all of our beaches are freshwater, except for Kynat Beach, which is on Porter's Lake, and it's brackish. And so it's just the salt water that we test for enterococci. All the other locations are tested for E. coli. And so if we get a geomean above this level, either for E. coli or enterococci, we would close the beach immediately. And that is in accordance with the water quality guidelines, the recreational water quality guidelines. So this, as I said, once the beach is closed, we would retest immediately. Typically, it's 48 hours from when we submit the sample to when we get the results back, just because of how long the analysis takes. So we would go out immediately and just take the same sample. We would have the lifeguards take like particular note, like was there a big rainstorm? Like was there a huge flock of geese that came by? Like anything that they can remember that might help be an indicator of the cause of the bacteria, the high bacteria number. And then we would send it in for testing, for analysis back to BV lab. And we basically just continue that procedure until the results are below guideline values, at which point we'll reopen the beach. So the bacteria procedure is pretty straightforward. And that's it really. And we see closures at beaches every year due to bacteria. It's, you know, they're on lakes, it gets warm, there's all kinds of people swimming and their dogs and stuff. So we see that every year. That's pretty common. And then our next slide, we have our cyanobacteria procedures. So this is becoming an increasing problem year over year. We do ID training with the beach's staff, all the lifeguards, all the supervisors. They attend an awareness training before the opening of the beach season. So we haven't done that yet because the regular lifeguards haven't started working yet, but we'll do that probably the last week of June. And basically all it is just visual ID training. So they are just supposed to be on the lookout for things that they, you know, may look like cyanobacteria. If they see something suspicious growing in the beach area, they take a picture and then contact Ahmed, their supervisor. And he's been through all the same cyanobacteria training that I have been, and he has dealt with this last year as well. So he's pretty well equipped to rule things out immediately that aren't cyanobacteria. So once he's made that initial assessment, he'll send it to me. We'll decide, you know, do we think this is cyanobacteria? Do we not? If we do think that it is, then I would go out and take a sample and take it to BioLimno for species analysis. So that he will get that, he'll take a look under the microscope, like I said, and if he identifies that there are toxin producing species present in the sample that we've taken, then the beach will remain closed. I'm not sure if I said this at first, but before we even take a sample, the beach is closed as soon as me and the aquatic specialist decide that we think there is blue-green algae there, so the beach will be closed immediately. So if BioLimno identifies that there is toxin-producing species, the beach will remain closed. If they determine that there isn't, then we can just reopen the beach and the protocol is over for that step. If toxin-producing species are present, the beach will remain closed. And we'll wait 7 days for the visible bloom to dissipate. After 7 days, where the bloom has been no longer visible, we'll go out and take a sample for microcystin analysis. So this is a composite sample. We mix 5 discrete samples together evenly and then send that in for analysis. And that will rush that, so it should be within 3 days. But like I said, it does have to be sent away to Ontario for analysis. So if that comes back below guideline values, which for blue-green algae, like I said, it is 20 micrograms per milliliter of total microcystins. If that comes back below the guideline value, we would just run out, do a test strip just to make sure that the conditions have not changed. And if the test strip, we use the Abraxas test strip kits, that's pretty standard. They have a recreational level guideline strip. So if that comes back below the guideline value, we can reopen the beach. If the test comes back from the lab saying that it is not below the guideline values, we will continue to retest using test strips, ideally daily, but as much as is reasonable, until the total microcystins are below that guideline value. And then we can reopen the beach again. So, and also there's a reporting component. This is just an overview for you folks. I don't see this changing at all. But basically, as soon as you know, with the fecal bacteria, as soon as we get a lab result saying there's been an exceedance, we'll have the beaches staff post signage and remain on site for 7 days after the closure, just to keep folks out of the water and, you know, for public safety and PR. And same with blue-green algae. Once we think we've seen a bloom, we close the beach immediately, put up signage, and staff will stay on site just to keep folks out of the water. Public Affairs also will notify a PSA and handle media inquiries. And we also have a duty to report to Environment and Climate Change, both their environmental health and their compliance divisions. So that is the end of the presentation. I will just note that I believe you folks had received a document from me before this meeting, just with some things that like I'm hoping you can help me think about. Because, you know, we're just feeling like, especially as blue-green algae is going to continue to, you know, become more of a problem. Just that 7-day beach closure, we're hoping to not have to wait 7 days if we can find another way to monitor for microcysteines, or just something where every time we think we might see a bloom, the beach is automatically closed for basically 48 hours. So we're just looking maybe for some guidance there. Another thing, just before I take any questions, I will say we have started with the Center for Water Resource Studies lab this year, a pilot program where we've deployed passive samplers at 8 locations at 6 of which are at HRM beaches, and 2 of which are just additional sites on Lake Charles and in Lake Micmac. And we're hoping that the passive samplers will be a sort of early warning sign for us. They look like hockey pucks. They're just dropped in the water, and they are measuring for both total microcysteines and for cyanobacteria DNA. And so this year, because they're still working out their research methodology, we're not counting on those results as part of our beach protocol, but we are hoping that going forward, we'll be able to use that as sort of an early warning detect, or maybe a way to detect toxins between the time we see a bloom and the time like our protocols would kick in to do sampling. So I guess that is all I really had to say about this. But yeah, I see there's questions, so would love your feedback.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I don't know what order hands went up in, but I see Andrew. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you very much. So I have a couple questions before I can comment on any kind of recommendations. The first being that your test strips that you're using, I feel like when you went through everything, this is after you've already identified there's microcystin, then you use one of the test strips to see whether or not there's warrant to take another sample. When you first visually identify the issue, why don't you use those test strips as the first pass rather than taking the water sample?
So the reason we don't is because with blue-green algae, especially with a pelagic bloom, which is typically what we've been seeing at our beaches, the toxins are inside the cells of the algae, so they're not released until they die typically. So if you go out while there's like a nice green bloom that people can see, like you may get an artificially low toxin number, and then later when they die off, it looks like we've done the testing, the water is safe, and it turns out later after they've died not to be. So that's why we don't do it initially. That's the purpose of the waiting period.
Right. So I actually did my master's degree on cyanobacteria and wastewater treatment and freshwater systems. So microcystin, you're probably sending the samples to a lab that has the detection limits that are able to meet your guidelines, and that would be why there's an issue here. You have to have extremely high concentrations of microcystin to have an ecological effect, either on any kind of aquatic biota, birds, waterfowl, dogs, humans, etc. You're reaching concentrations that would exceed 20 micrograms per liter. However, obviously, that threshold is where the concern would lie. Those test strips are sometimes going to produce a false negative. But the three days to have the water sample and then retesting it with the test strip, and then another 3 days to confirm, I can see where you're having that issue of the 7 days then. And so, while you might have a false negative, as long as you're then maybe are those test strips expensive? Maybe that's another question before. Yeah, they are. Okay, I thought they might be. Is it more expensive than the water sample to Ontario?
No, it's not more example. It's not more, because we typically just do one water sample to Ontario per bloom, and then we follow up with the test strips because of the cost and also the speed. Yeah, like I bought 2 boxes of 20 kits, I think, and it was like $2,000.
Yeah, that's not abnormal. Hopefully the water studies labs method can be tested and compared. That might be the easiest solution, is to continue your current protocol and then compare the test strips with the methodology from the lab at Dow. However, I get your point. The cells do have to be broken. All you do is you shake the sample. We used to use a little like it's meant to, like, it has 2 ball bearings. It's meant to break wood apart, and we just put it in the shaker and shook the sample. That's how we tested for microcystin in the field. And I remember it being about $99 each kit to do those samples. But rushing a sample to CCIW or something in Burlington, I think, would be $200 to $300. So, and 3 days. So that might be, to see how things work out this year with the different methodologies, and then come up with a different solution.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I know that UG, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, before, like Andrew, before I can make any recommendations, I do have a background in biochemistry. This really interests me. I have a question as well. Does sample shipping process affect the sample integrity? Like, is there any kind of sample being kind of broken? Have you experienced any resampling? Has that ever happened before? Is that a problem?
I might, if Emma Waddy can jump in. This is my first year doing this program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Waddy. I'm the program coordinator for a new lake monitoring program. And like Elizabeth said, I was a water resource specialist role last year. So I was doing this program. We didn't have any sampling issues with for our cyanobacteria protocols, but we did have a few issues with our E. coli sampling, but that's all done locally. It's the cyanobacteria for microcystin analysis that's sent off out of province. So I don't believe there were any issues last year.
Okay, that's good to know. I used to work in the ocean tech industry, and I've seen new technology coming out in terms of, portable devices for sampling and analysis on site. I wonder if, and these technology are coming out of local universities. I know Professor Christina Botero in Memorial University in Newfoundland was developing something like this. That was like 2 years ago. So I wonder if it's possible to pilot some project with, university professors who are developing new technology in this area, and to test those portable devices that can actually do analysis on site, and that can reduce the turnaround time in terms of samples getting back and forth. Whether or not, I don't know what's the HRM's kind of project or procurement process that could also affect kind of the timeline for this. But that would be kind of my recommendation on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we definitely don't have the capacity to do that pilot testing ourselves, but would be, if there's a researcher out there who's interested, we are too.
Okay, thanks, Yuji. David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was able to catch a part of the conference, I guess, last week on blue-green algae. So it was very interesting, but I only made it for the afternoon. So there was some talk about the passive samplers, and I missed a good chunk of that. I think it was in the morning. Those are not real time. That's collecting samples over time, and then it needs to be collected. So what's the frequency of collection?
So they're collecting the samples weekly, and at the same time as they collect a sample, they're also taking a grab sample and doing total microcystins on the instantaneous grab sample, as well as the 1 week passive sampling that's been going on, just to have that data and compare. But yeah, at this point in time, it's a 1 week frequency. I'm not sure, based on the methodology, they may up that, they may lower that. This is still in early stages.
Right. So it sounds like at this stage, that's sort of more of for future possibilities. It's not really a part of the active monitoring program right now.
No, so we're hoping that it will be, like, we're hoping it will be able to indicate blooms before they happen and get our testing protocol underway sooner. If they find an exceedance in their grab sample of total microsystems, we are going to go out with the test strip and like do the analysis ourselves as well. But the passive sampling this year, it's just too new for us to, base our beach program on it. But it is like we're doing it with an aim to have it inform the beach protocol in the future.
Okay, interesting to see if there can be any sort of with that long sort of longitudinal data set. Be interesting to see if you can find any correlations with other variables. Completely different question, if you don't mind me jumping in with another one there, Chair. What triggers an assessment at a non-lifeguarded beach if you don't have staff eyes on every day?
For blue-green algae?
Yeah, or fecal bacteria, I guess, as well. But yeah, either, I guess.
It's really outside the scope of our mandate to do monitoring outside our monitored beaches. So for fecal monitoring, and Emma, you can jump in. I feel like maybe you know more about this, but it's just community groups are maybe doing it themselves, or we're doing different studies for like pollution source tracking, that sort of thing. Like we do that, but there wouldn't typically be like triggers at all on unmonitored beaches. For blue-green algae, if it's in the city and it's on an unmonitored beach and we get, that would be, we would just be diverting folks to Department of the Environment. Like they're the ones who are supposed to handle that. So if it were at an unmonitored beach in the city, like maybe we would put out signage, but that would be all we would do. We don't have any protocol. It's just the beaches and just during the beach season for us right now.
Yeah, early days. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. CO, I see your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. So my preoccupation is always with causes. So it looks like we're dealing here with effects and how to manage effects. And, sadly, one of the effects is that beaches get closed. I came here from Ottawa about 10 years ago, and the protocol there, I think, was even stricter for the Ottawa River, where if there was a major rainstorm, they would preventively shut the beach until they got tests back. So even I think a more severe protocol. But we are dealing with the effects, and those are effects of, in my view, past policy errors. So I'm wondering, I know that it's not your sort of domain, but I think as this committee, we need to back up and say, okay, so what are the causes? How can the sources of this pollution be mitigated? How can it be prevented in the future? So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, and who in the city is working on that aspect. Like, so we have a problem. Sometimes we have to step back and say, how did we get here? It's a place that we don't like to be. How do we prevent that in the future? And how can we stop those sources from coming into existing lakes where we know there is a problem?
Great. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to pass it over to Emma Wadley to talk about what they're doing at First Lake. So we are actually, we know that this is, just the effect of a larger problem. We are talking about developing a lake management framework that can be applied for pollution prevention to all lakes in this municipality. That's obviously a huge job. And we're just in the early days of it now, but that is the hope, is that we can get stronger pollution prevention.
Oh, Elizabeth, I think we've lost you there. I don't know if you can hear me any longer.
Oh, I'm froze. Okay.
Oh,
don't know why.
no,
You're back.
okay.
Oh, I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know where I froze off, but I was saying that we are trying to get a larger lake management protocol put in place for the city to prevent that sort of thing. We're also working on my team, and again, this is just, we're pushing for this with the regional plan update to get stronger stormwater management protocols put in place for land use, because a lot of this is pollution that's coming off like land, runoff from overland. So something that we're hoping to do is work towards having more stormwater contained on properties. We've been doing and now I guess I'll pass it to Emma to talk a little bit about some microbial source tracking studies that we've been participating in.
Yeah, so there are two different examples I think that are relevant here, Theo. So one is the pollution control study that had been done on Lake Micmac and Lake Chinook a few years ago that found a couple of different sources of, like, the study was done because they were having frequent closures of the beach on Lake Chinook, and where it's such a high recreational usage with all the paddling clubs and trails and people who live on the lakes. They did that study, and they did have several recommendations that went forward to council, and that Elizabeth and I are currently working on to implement those recommendations. And then the other example is similar for First Lake in Sackville. They there's Kinsman Beach, and that had been a recreational or a supervised beach by HRM, but had frequent closures to the point that they took it off the supervised beach list because it had so many closures. I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018, but there was one year where it just didn't pass the standards at all summer long. It was closed all summer. And so in order to figure out why that's happening, we're currently doing a pollution control study there as well to figure out where the sources of bacteria are coming from. And that's in collaboration. Well, we're leading it, but the Friends of First Lake are also doing some sampling to understand what's happening in the lake too. So we're working closely with them, and CBCL is the consulting firm doing the work for us. So we are trying to figure out, but as Elizabeth said, like, it's really tricky to do this like lake by lake. And so we'd like to have some overarching lake management protocols in place so that we can have we don't have to like be so reactive to every individual lake every single time, because there are over 1,000 in HRM. So as much as Elizabeth and I do love being busy, it is a lot of work. So.
Okay, Theo, is that good?
Yeah, thanks for that answer. It's it's really good to know that you're on the case. I mentioned it also in the context that there are major new development projects that have been fast-tracked by the province, and those are going to have water and sewage, and they're going to have lawns, and they're going to have pets, and they're going to have all the usual suspects. So I guess my message is it can't happen fast enough for new standards and regulations, because we'll lose other lakes. It's just inevitable unless we know how to not lose other lakes.
Yeah, and we are working on the RFPs for the watershed studies, and for we're trying to get better environmental protections in off the jump and get watershed studies that have some teeth as opposed to just information for us. So I want to say agree with you completely with what you've just said. Like, we're aware of all this development and doing what we can. I mean, we are a small team, but the regional plan is under review right now. We're trying to make changes as much as we can for increased environmental protections, and we're looking at improving stormwater protection for finished developed sites as well. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but we're definitely aware of that challenge and working as much as we can to stop it. And not stop the development, of course, just stop the negative effects of development on the lakes as much as we can.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your sincerity, and you're obviously very committed to, both of you, committed to keeping our lakes safe. So that's wonderful.
Okay, thanks, Theo. I don't see any other hands up. I just have maybe a couple of quick comments for Elizabeth and Emma. In relation to your discussion document that you circulated, you did ask the question, should testing aim to consider first flush events after dry periods? And I would say certainly yes, if possible. Stormwater systems, of course, don't always contain just stormwater. There are other things that get in there and can grow further, within the system, and then they do tend to get discharged at higher concentrations during a first flush after a major storm. And with climate change, there is the risk that we'll be subject to more extreme storm events. So you'll get probably more of that rather than less of it in future. And in regard to the stormwater systems, I would recommend ongoing close contact with Halifax Water, and you may already be doing that. Halifax Water has a pollution prevention team who are responsible for trying to identify sources of bacteria that are getting into the stormwater system. And this is typically like a cross connection, a sanitary sewer pipe that's gotten connected erroneously to the stormwater system. And of course, that conveys sewage and raw sewage and bacteria into the stormwater system, which typically discharges to the nearest water body. The other thing with Halifax Water is that the pumping stations in both the stormwater and the sanitary system can become overloaded during a large storm event. And they're not supposed to, they're designed not to, but if they do, a lot of infiltration happens, water gets into those pipes that is not supposed to be there. And so the capacity of the pump station can become overwhelmed. And in that case, it necessarily just overflows to the local environment. It runs downhill and ends up in a lake or a river. So any information that Halifax Water might be able to give you about those kind of sources, I think would be useful to your programs to try to identify sources and track them back perhaps through the stormwater system to the ultimate source, whatever that might be. So just a couple there.
That's good. That's good feedback. We're trying to work with them. Halifax Water has been working with us on the First Lake project and has it to try and identify cross connections, that sort of thing. And I've reached out to talk to Halifax Water about their stormwater programs. So that's good. I'm glad we're on the same page there.
Yeah. It was Charles Lloyd was the individual when I was there who was in charge of the pollution prevention program. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he would be a good. Yep. Okay. Thanks very much. If there's nothing else. Oh, sorry, CO, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little further on the issue of water filtration plants becoming overwhelmed in storms. This was a big problem in Ottawa when I was involved with water protection there. Being a historical city like Halifax is, there were a lot of combined sewer and stormwater lines. So the issue there is so as you alluded to, when normal times, the sewage treatment plant can handle all of the stuff that's coming in, but in a major storm event, it cannot. So what happens is it's diverting. In the case of Ottawa, in a major storm event, raw sewage would go into the river, period. And there was nothing that could be done, really. So Ottawa ended up spending, or at least I think I left before it was done, but literally billions of dollars to try to solve this problem. They were going to build a huge, basically tank in the Sandy Hill neighborhood to hold stormwater until the sewage treatment plants could handle it and then sort of leak it out, a bit at a time. The policy error that led to this is allowing combined sewer and stormwater systems, and that there's no need for studies to determine that. It's just a technological fact that if you have combined sewers and stormwater systems, you are going to get incidents where your treatment plant is overwhelmed and they'll have no choice but to release raw sewage into wherever it's, and as we've heard, in many municipalities, or there might be private systems or whatever it is. I really hope that with the new developments going forward, that because we're coming to the game a little bit later than Ottawa did in terms of its development. So we have the benefit of that knowledge. And I really hope that we don't repeat the errors, because there's no reason to. There's no debate. There's no reasonable, other than cost, to say that we should have combined sewers, and they're just a problem waiting to happen. So I just wanted to say that, because we've got 10 or 11 development projects that this committee has flagged as being potentially putting lakes potentially and rivers potentially at risk. We need to pay attention to that. I think, the easy answer that requires no research whatsoever is to say no combined sewer and waste and stormwater. Just don't do it. Thanks.
Apply to the treatment plants as well. Central core in HRM are separated sewers. There would be combined. However, closer to the core in Halifax and Dartmouth areas, sort of the peninsula and central Dartmouth, do have combined sewers that are just legacies of decades old systems. And I know Halifax Water had done some degree of sewer separation, some in Halifax and I think some in Dartmouth, but it's very expensive. It's very disruptive, of course, when you have to dig up old sewers and replace them in an extensive area. So, yeah.
That's right. So don't make the mistake in the first place, because it's much harder to correct once you've made the mistake.
Definitely, yeah. Yes. Okay, thanks very much. If I could ask a quick question, I was just curious, Emma, if I can ask, has the HRM water sampling, the lake sampling program begun yet this year? I know it was scheduled around here.
Yes, so the update on that is that the first round of sampling was completed in May.
Okay.
All 76 lakes were sampled, and we had to have some bathymetry maps made for some of the lakes that didn't have those already, but the first round of sampling went underway, which was more or less painless. And we're gearing up for our summer sampling in collaboration with some community groups.
Okay, thank you very much. And on behalf of the board, I would ask, I don't know if the intention is to make that data public. I know it had been done in the past with previous lake sampling, so I'd hope that the data might be available for the board to examine at whatever point is appropriate.
We're making our way through it. It's a lot of data, but we're making our way.
Yes. Okay, good. Thanks very much. I see your hand still up. I don't know if that's from previous, or do you have another question?
No, I'm good. Thanks very much. I'm good. I'm fine. Thanks. No question.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of our agenda, we don't have any further items from committee members and no added items. The date of our next meeting is suggested as July 7th. So we'll make note of that. And there being nothing else, I'll just call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay, Andrew? And I believe that's all we require. I don't think that requires a vote. So thank you very much, everyone. If Mr. Mandeville is still here, thank you for your presentation. We'll take that under advisement. And thank you to the members. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks all.
Thanks very much, Tony.
Okay.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for your feedback.
Thanks, staff.